Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Citizens of Lorcana podcast, a podcast where we invite you to be a part of their world. We are your hosts, Jared and James, and today we are talking about the lore of Lorcana. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another week. Last pod, we talked to Adara about starting into Lorcana with zero prior TCG experience. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check it out. And today we're discussing the story of Lorcana with more special guests. That's right, guest. I think James and I are both interested in the story of Lorcana, but it isn't our primary focus.
So today we're instead bringing on a panel of guests who have been speculating about the story of Lorcana since the game was first announced. And these guests need no introduction to those of you in the Lorcana HQ Discord server. We are pleased to welcome Surreal.
Hello.
And Parkerob.
Hey, how's it going?
And Levram.
Hello.
All right. Cool. Hello, everybody.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This will be a slightly different pod as it is mostly speculative. We are hoping to piece some things together as we attempt to figure out the story of Lorcana. The source material is mostly taken from the official website and the write-up by Eric Switzer over at thegamer.com, which we will link to in the show notes. Now, this episode will be broken down into two parts. First, what we know about the story and the implications of those facts. And second, what we'd like to know. So first, let's start with what we know.
All right. So one of the things we know, of course, is that this takes place in Lorcana, which is features the center of it, the Great Illuminary, and that the game is focused on both the interactions of the Glimmers, which are Disney characters and items, and the Illumineers, which are us, the players. So in the article with the head of story, Samantha McFerrin, in the Gamer article, she mentioned things like the action cards, like Dragonfire, represent actions taken by the Glimmers, but that there will also be actions that can be taken by us, the Illumineers. And then that should basically start us thinking about the things that can happen in the game. So what do you guys think of this? And who wants to kick it off with what they think this means?
So, I mean, I didn't actually index too much on that comment in terms of the actions and kind of us or the Glimmers taking actions. I think of it kind of more as, we've how many action cards have we seen? Just one or two, I think. I kind of think of it more, it's just the Dragonfire. We can't tell yet, but I think it's kind of, from a story perspective, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, the Glimmers may be taking some action, but you notice, like with Dragonfire specifically, it matches Maleficent's ability in terms of name. So I think that's hinting at the Glimmer themselves having the action. But then I suspect there's going to be some of those action cards where it doesn't map to the action or the ability on any particular Glimmer. And I think that's probably the scenario where an Illumineer is going to be the one taking that action. So that's kind of how I interpreted that. At least mapping the fact that some action cards map to Glimmer characters and some don't. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, I do wonder if, so another action card that we have is the Healing Glow. And I wonder if that ability is going to be, Healing Glow, if that's going to be an ability that Rapunzel has, or if, healing a character is something that the Illumineer does, by virtue of this magic. So that remains to be seen. I do wonder if the flourish non-flourish has anything to do here. Dragonfire doesn't have a flourish, and it's an action being taken by a Glimmer that already exists. If Maleficent is breathing fire, then she already is existing in in the realm of Lorcana. So I don't know if there's any implications there or not.
An idea that came to me actually while watching the hobbies and happiness, that
Live
infamous
stream?
word for no, not the live stream, the infamous word for Dan, the speculation video.
Oh yeah.
um their speculation video, they were speculating on there being cards that would interact with the lore that you gain, and speculating that there may be cards that where you interact with like your opponent's lore, like take away 2 or 3 lore or something like that. And I feel like that fits right in here, where that would be something that the Illumineer would be doing. Like, you're both racing to get that lore. You're gonna try to do whatever you can to interfere with your opposing Illumineer and trying to get to your goal faster. So that might be the type of action card that might be something that the Illumineers will be doing.
Yeah, I think that the basics of it, though, if we're looking at it from the development standpoint, this is the story reason for why we're playing the game, and the things that we as the players can do to interact in the game with the other players. And this is just the way they basically fit it into the story, is that, you know, not all actions are taken by the glimmers because we're doing some things that don't really make sense for a glimmer to do. Correct?
Right.
So this is basically just the way that they fit it in. And of course, you have to build that story around it. And then you can delve deeper into the story with just knowing that there's a bunch of things that the game player is going to have to do. You can then build story around that.
Yeah, I like that take a lot. In terms of like when one Illumineer is specifically targeting another Illumineer from a story perspective, it makes sense why you kind of take the glimmer out of the equation.
The thing that jogged my brain juices about this was Adara last week when she was talking about, oh, this might be like you break your opponent's inkcaster. And it just made me think maybe these are like the Uno type card interactions where you have skip a turn or draw 5 cards. But in this case, you know, it's you lose 2 lore or whatever. Things like that interfere with your opponent's ability to play the game of Lorcana. That's what I was thinking these other actions might be.
Yeah, that's a great point. It could be something like, something like mill in Magic, where they discard the top 2 cards of their library or whatever we're going to call it here in Lorcana. But yeah, that's a great point. Things that affect the other Illumineer's ability to play cards, and yeah, that's cool.
Okay. Whoa. We know that the Great Illuminary has a lore book, and floating above the book are these story stars that contain fragments of Disney stories. For me, this was one of the most illuminating insights from the article, where these story stars. We know that to bring a glimmer to life, it will take the light of story stars and the magical ink from the inkcaster, the staff of the Illumineer. And in the article, it says, Disney characters and items that only exist in Lorcana. Using the Great Illuminary's lore book and a tool called the Inkcaster, we combine magical inks with story stars containing fragments of Disney stories to summon glimmers that add to the lore of Lorcana. Together, our job is to adventure across Lorcana, seeking out this valuable resource called lore to preserve and protect it from all threats. Now, we will talk about the threats facing Lorcana later, but what do we make of the rest of this, about the story stars and the Inkcaster? What do you guys think about that?
I think that the story stars reveal, if you will, I think that has, probably some pretty big implications on gameplay. The story star, that's a term that we haven't heard before this. And we've known about the magical ink. It has seemed pretty clear that the magical ink was going to be, the resource that we use to summon the glimmers and, play the abilities. But this introduction of story stars and the talk of, combining them together, I think I'm not 100% sold on this game using, a two resources, like a multiple two resource system. But I think that, this kind of hints towards that being a possibility. Whether or not, I mean, still, again, we have no idea how to play the game. No idea if resources are going to be in deck, if it's going to be something like Hearthstone where they generate every turn. But in my mind, the addition of story stars, to me, sounds like something that we're going to have to spend, in order to play the cards.
So it's interesting. I think of it almost from the other side, and I think it's an interesting theory. But like I think of it from the other side, where in the Disney universe of what does a star mean, right? The wishing star is one of the major ones, and I know they have their movie Wish, I think, coming out later this year. And I just think of it as maybe it's a way to distinguish these stars in the Disney universe, and like these aren't just any stars that are being sucked into the great illuminary to create these glimmers, but maybe it's specific stars, and maybe they're starting to kind of flesh out what are the stars in the Disney universe, and maybe they have different abilities or traits or whatever it happens to be. And I think of that almost more, not so much from the Lorcana perspective, but more from that Wish movie itself, where it's just trying to understand like, what is a wishing star? And I think there's a bunch of other kinds of stars probably going to show up in that movie. And is this going to be one of those kind of stars? And I'm thinking of it almost from that angle.
Wait, so when you say the stars, are you talking about like the stars of the movies? Like the Hercules is a star?
No, like actual stars.
Okay.
Physical stars, yeah.
Interesting.
Stars do take a very big prominence in a lot of Disney movies. So, in Peter Pan, you head out to the second star on the right or whatever it is, and just
the Lion King,
all the different wishes and everything on stars. So, I mean, yeah, it's very important. So, using it as stars in this Disney game, I think, is obviously a key thing, and just tying it to essentially all of Disney history.
Yeah, this in particular reminds me a lot of Kingdom Hearts, if you've ever played those games. And that game, all the different worlds that you visit, which are all these Disney worlds, are stars in the lore of Kingdom Hearts. In the very first game, you're exploring because you notice all the stars are going out and all these worlds are disappearing. So you're trying to figure out what's going on there. So it sounds very much like for Lorcana, these are these worlds that you're taking inspiration from and drawing your inspiration from them and bringing it to the great illuminary. For what purpose, I don't know yet, but that's kind of one of the ideas that I've been speculating on in the case of the stars.
So you're thinking the story stars are like the different stories, and maybe it could even be like later in the article talks about how, Hades sitting on the throne actually happened in Lorcana, and you're saying maybe the story star is the world in which that happened. Is that what you're saying?
It maybe not specifically where that happened, but where you're pulling your inspiration from. Like the story star is maybe where Hercules is happening, and then from there you're using your ink and that to create your glimmers. And I believe it's mentioned in the article that that like the dreamborns are created by the imagination of the Illumineers. So you're making your own tweaks to these characters as you're pulling your inspiration from them and creating your glimmers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we had a specific section on that, but the way they explained it in the article is Storyborn is essentially the same thing as if it came out of the Disney movie. And that's the character, the Glimmer. But the Dreamborn, as you said, is by the imagination of the Illumineer. And so it's each individual Lumineer putting their spin on that Disney character. So I think the story stars are just like recorded copies of Disney stories. And that's basically all that it is. And then we're then bringing in the stories and using them to the benefit of creating the lore. That's where, all of those story stars are coming in. Of course, I also think there's got to be some kind of reason why we're using the story stars to create it. There has to be something from that than just pulling the character from it or the item. I think also that there may be something with the resources.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Everybody has a different take on what these story stars are. I love it.
So do we have any other comments about the story stars?
Maybe it's a bigger question, but it's like, for me, I'm wondering where Lorcana fits into the Disney universe from a storytelling perspective, right? Disney has a very, many different stories, and there's an opportunity to weave those together. And Lorcana could be the venue in which some of those get woven together. And they've done it with other things too, like Kingdom Hearts and what have you, right? So I'm really curious to see, how much freedom Ravensburger has, and where Disney wants to take that storytelling as well. And I just think it's going to be interesting. So I'm excited to see it.
And not to bring up what is one of the most oft debated topics on the Lorcana HQ Discord server, but bringing in other IPs beyond the Walt Disney Animation Studios, like Pixar and Marvel and Star Wars, the background of this story easily accounts for all of that, because all you have to do is oh, look, we found more stars, and oh, look, they have Pixar characters in them, and then look at these stars over here that we didn't know they're in this. They showed up recently, and look, all these stars have Marvel characters in them. It just easily allows them to bring in all of any IP they want that is owned by Disney into the Lorcana universe.
No, I mean, I think that they'll definitely, I'm sure that they'll bring in, Pixar, I think, is 100%. I think, at least in my mind, when I think of Disney, Pixar isn't any separate. All those Disney Pixar movies are Disney movies, even though they're not, Disney Animation Studios or whatever the technical canon term is. To me, there's no denying that Toy Story is a Disney movie. And to lock out Pixar properties from Lorcana would be a huge miss. I'm sure that it's just, a licensing thing that, they'll eventually, work out. But then you get to the IPs that Disney has acquired, great IPs, but they don't necessarily feel like Disney to me. And I'm not against them, coming into the game, eventually. I wouldn't necessarily expect them or, personally want them. But I'm not going to make a fuss about it either way. I love the MCU. I've tried to like Star Wars. I think I'm one of the few nerds that doesn't care for it. Yeah.
I will say, I don't know if you guys ever played Disney Infinity, but that game is the closest I can think of where they did these crossover type things, and they were all done in the same type of animation. And I know Disney Infinity fell flat on its face, but the game itself was really fun, and I loved being able to play with Jack Sparrow and Anakin Skywalker. That was so cool. Or Ahsoka. And I mean, I don't care either way. I don't know how we got on this debate about IPs here. I don't care either way, but I wouldn't mind if they do, and I wouldn't mind if they stay, because these characters with the Floodborn versions, they could iterate them in any way possible. They really could have a Halloween set of Disney Floodborn characters. That'd be like a dream come true for me. I don't think that'll ever happen, but it could happen. The possibilities are limitless, and they could just iterate on these characters forever.
Yep. And I think that your idea of a Halloween set is probably more likely to happen than not happen, actually, especially years down the line when they start coming out with lots of specialized sets, and they need to come up with ideas to fill in, the next quarter set, oh, let's do a Halloween set for release in September, October. So I think it's definitely possible.
Secret layer.
I'm so
For-
hoping for the Christmas Carol set.
Oh yeah, Muppets
For-
Christmas.
Yeah.
For
Oh
me,
no, I'm a Mickey Christmas person with Scrooge McDuck, and it's like, oh, it's gonna be awesome.
So much,
I-
so much stuff. 100 years of stuff, people. We have 100 years of stories that they could pull into this game. It's crazy.
So many stars to pull from. Yeah.
So, as we're talking about this, we know that Lorcana is not just the book in the Great Illuminary, and not just the Great Illuminary, but it's an actual location. And besides, the halls of Lorcana, we also know that there's the presence of the inklands, which was something that was brand new. So we have McFerrin also said in the article that what the purpose of lore is, what the forces that are threatening Lorcana, and that each piece of lore is a fragment of a larger story, and that while much of it is kept safe in the halls of Lorcana, others have been scattered throughout the inklands. So those are locations and things that we have to keep in mind about the story as a whole. This is just pieces of the story. So what do you guys think about the fact that there's an actual world that is Lorcana?
How long do you have? So, like, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and actually, I think that article really helped clarify some things, because I think a lot of us were thinking, hey, maybe this is a multiverse type situation where there's different versions of Elsa and Anna between Dreamborn and Storyborn and Floodborn and what have you, and they come from different universes. And I think that article actually made it pretty clear that, like, no, there's a relatively singular realm of Lorcana, and it has these inklands within it. And these, I think the description was, Hades specifically sitting on that throne. No, that's existing in the realm of Lorcana. And what I really hearken to with a lot of Lorcana is actually a movie from when I was a kid that I used to love, is just The Never-Ending Story. And I always think back to the main antagonist in that movie was the Nothing, right? And in the game of Lorcana, we see all these allusions to light, right? We're Illumineers, the great illuminary, glimmers. And what's the antithesis of light? Usually darkness or nothing. And similarly, I don't think it's gonna be the same story, obviously, but I think similarly to The Never-Ending Story, there was also a quote in that article that talked about we as the Lumineers were brought to the realm of Lorcana because of our imagination. And one of the themes of that movie and the book that preceded it was that that realm was dying because people didn't have imagination, and people weren't reading books and so on and so forth. So I see a lot of kind of corollaries between the two. Maybe it's getting ahead of things a little bit, talking about the antagonist and what have you. But I think in the same way that in The Never-Ending Story you had different areas of this world, you had the palace and you had these rock munchers or whatever they're called, like just the different parts of that story. I think similarly you could imagine having these different inklands, and maybe they're themed similar to the 6 inks we see in Lorcana. And there's some stories that happen there, and I think we could probably all imagine video games or something based on that kind of setup that would be really fun to play. So it opened my eyes, at least, hearing that, hey, this isn't a multiverse. No, it's a realm that's expansive. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we got this confirmation, because before looking at the cards, you'd see Robin Hood, and he's knocking his arrow, and so I'm wondering, is this just a piece of art, a photo of him in Sherwood Forest in his own story, or is he here? Is he here in Lorcana? Is that a place that that as Illumineers that we would go? We would be there with Robin Hood. And so I'm glad we got that confirmation. I kind of was thinking that this is a place that we would be in Lorcana, because if you look at some of the art of for example, Scar, he's still a Storyborn. I think he's still Storyborn. But if you see like the cave, and you look at the rocks behind him, it has these circular patterns that are representative of the sapphire ink. you see, the little circles with the dots, kind of looks like a model of an atom or something like that. So you see that all over his art. You clearly see that in the art for the Sapphire Maleficent in human form. Even some of the other arts like Moana, we still don't really know much about what her card will be, but the dunes in the background, the overlapping sand kind of looks like the amber ink image that they had showed before. So I think that there were hints before that these characters were represented in the realm of Lorcana rather than in their own worlds, but I'm really glad that we got some confirmation on that.
Yeah, I will say this has given particular credence to the particular theory that we may get location cards, and the inklands sound like that kind of thing, like where are we right now, and being able to play down to, oh, we're going to be in the Sapphire inklands, and that'll be some sort of effect that we have to deal with or something. Yeah, just feel like it makes it more of a possibility that there are named locations, and seeing what that turns out to be, whether it's just going to be for story purposes or something we'll actually see in game, remains to be seen. But I think it gives a little more credence to that theory.
I haven't really thought that we would see any type of location cards in Lorcana, before this. My thought was no, there's no indication. Now, I'm thinking, maybe there will be, as just kind of, global effects. Could be that, both players can have a location played or just one, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I did not think locations were a possibility. But hearing George talk about maybe we're in the Sapphire Inkland, or maybe we're in the Steel Inkland, or I mean, the fact that they feel like it's important enough for us to know that these locations exist, tell me that like they wouldn't bring them up for nothing. And the analogy I've heard people use, I haven't played Pokemon, but people have said in Pokemon, the card game, they have like stadium cards that you can put on the table, and I think maybe there's only one stadium card at a time, and the benefits on that card applies across the board. And I guess if they're going to bring in locations, that would be a reasonable way to do it.
I'm just happy that they are just doing so much detailed work to make this like a fully fleshed out universe where, like you said, you can see the inks design pattern in the backgrounds and other design aspects of the individual art from all these different artists that they basically hired all of these artists to do. Like, here, give me your version of like Stitch, and like, and don't forget to put in this little bit of a design somewhere into it, and telling that to however many artists they hire to do 204 pieces of art a set, and working that into every single little piece of art somewhere. I mean, we don't know it's a card yet. I'm sure it is, but the Hakuna Matata scene, the log that they're walking on has the amber threads on as the vines on the log. And I mean, just little things like that it's just incredible seeing just all of that detail and the time they spent making sure everything had a connection to that it is.
It's just oozing with flavor. They're definitely doing a great job with the art and the flavor.
And I love the attention to detail. I think, what initially drew me in when I first saw the pictures of the cards was the artwork, and it's just beautiful. But I think what really kind of captures the imagination and potentially holds you there is that story longer term. And I think that I see a really nice attention to detail on both of those. And I'm excited about where the story could lead. And they're really setting themselves up in a nice way where it's like, they're building some of the foundational pieces to tell a story, but without going into too much detail or without revealing too much. And so, yeah, even if we don't know the full story in the first chapter in the first year, there's a lot of pieces there that they could build on without just leaving it completely open-ended. So I'm really excited.
Well, that's actually one of the future questions that we were going to ask, but let's talk about it now. I mean, the thing that I love is exactly like what you're saying. This story sounds like it's part of a 4 chapter series. Like maybe there's 4 chapters in this book of Lorcana, and it sounds like, I'm trying to pull up the quote here, but it sounds like the story builds on itself. So it's like, are we going to be left with cliffhangers after, the first chapter? Like if we were to watch the first episode or first part of a 2-part movie. Here's the quote. McFerrin says that each set continues the story forward. The first storyline, which begins in the first chapter this August, will continue its overarching storyline across the first 4 sets. Ravensburger has confirmed a quarterly release schedule. Anyway, so, I mean, and this kind of ties into the question we were going to ask about the threats facing Lorcana. What do you guys make of this 4-part story? And what kind of threats do you think are going to reveal themselves?
I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, like I think the threat is going to be somehow related to darkness. And what I think a lot of the Disney stories do a really, I'll say, good job of kind of simplifying complex things down. And what I mean by that is, there's a hero and a villain. And I mean, this is more the traditional Disney. And I think they've, more modern films have gotten more nuanced. And actually, I love those too, like in Encanto and what have you. But some of the older films were very kind of good and evil, black and white, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's what I think of as probably the most likely underlying story. It's like, hey, we're pulled into this illuminary. It sounds like the illuminary itself brought us here due to our imaginations. Lots of questions like, who created this place? Where did they go? What happened to them? Like, all super exciting. And I'm personally hoping that for the first 4 sets and kind of the social media posts and everything else that goes along with the story that gets built up is to help explain the scene. Like, why are we here? Maybe even who created it, or at least what's the threat to this place? And is it one of those kind of conscious antagonists where it's like, no, somebody intends harm to this, somebody wants to do away with light or imagination or whatever it happens to be? Or is it more one of those apathetic things where it's like, hey, the world stopped caring and became cynical, and we need to bring the light back to it? I don't know, but I definitely see things leaning that way. So
yeah, I think that at least for this first chapter, I don't think it's going to be, some big bad. I don't think it's going to be some villain, that's trying to, take over the Great Illuminary or anything like that. I think that it will be something like just general darkness, or I think somebody mentioned in Dreamlight Valley, that the threat in Dreamlight Valley, the Disney game is like forgetting, so I think that this darkness, and we kind of see it in the first trailer, creeping up on the Great Illuminary. I think it will be darkness or forgetting, or apathy, just something nebulous like that. But that said, I think to create a compelling story going forward in the future, you do kind of need a big bad, or some type of physical antagonists. It could be a Glimmer goes rogue or something like that, and has a plan of its own. But I think at least for this first chapter, kind of the way they do things in the MCU, where one phase will have one villain, or have one threat, but then after a few phases it gets to a big bad. I think it'll go more that direction.
Get comfortable here because I have a take. Kind of ringing off of the comment that you made of Glimmer going rogue. They explained the Storyborn and Dreamborn. They did not explain what the Floodborn are. They said that's coming later in the story. So my theory right now is something with the magical ink being kind of like a double-edged sword, where you can use it to create these dreamborns. The dreamborns are the ones that we essentially create. The storyborns are what we copy. The Floodborn, to me, just seems like the idea of the magical ink kind of taking over and becoming too much. And now we got this crazy alternate universe sort of version of the glimmer that we maybe did not intend to make initially. And just something with that, something with the ink becoming too much if put into the wrong hands. Maybe there is someone that's creating glimmers that's like Hades, is where he has taken over Olympus and everything. It's like, why would we do that as Illumineers? So maybe something with the ink, where basically how we use the ink is what's gonna help or hurt the Great Illuminary and Lorcana in general. Just something along those lines. That's my current running theory.
Like unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you all. I mean, those are all amazing theories, but how would this story play out in a card game? I mean, maybe if it was a co-op card game where you were racing to rescue a Floodborn, I don't know, but it doesn't sound like Lorcana is going to be that. Or will the story more likely be told outside of the card game and it's just ancillary to the game? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I personally, I think the story is going to be a little bit ancillary to the game itself. But given the company Disney behind the story and their amazing ability to create very powerful stories, I think it has a lot of potential. So even if it is one of those things where it's somewhat ancillary, and I'll look to kind of Magic the Gathering. Like, I know there's tons of lore behind that game and stories that were built around it and what have you. And you could play the game without knowing anything about the story. I did for several years. But I think Disney is in a unique position where they could take that story and really run with it. So yes, you have a card game that over time evolves and explains the story, but also you could build so much more around it. Imagine comic books or television series or video games or even movies in the same universe, explaining the same story and fleshing it out and giving the motivations for all these things. Was it an accident? Somebody spilled the ink and you get Floodborn? Is it, no, there is that big bad, but we don't find out until Force sets in and a year later. And so I think there's a lot of possibility, but I don't think it's necessary to tell the story in the game, but I think you can help evolve it through both the game and the storytelling alongside it. And Ravensburger having Disney as a partner really opens the door to some of that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, my main game over the years has been Magic, and I see it, taking a lot of. I think Lorcana will probably borrow a lot from Magic, for good reason, but I think the storytelling is going to be one of the things it takes from it, where the story itself, is grand and overarching, and the story, for each set informs the mechanics in that set, and it informs the flavor and the design of the cards in the set. But when you're playing a match against your opponent, the story of Magic doesn't really play out turn by turn. It just kind of it just kind of informs what cards will be in that set and what type of mechanics you'll see, and it can get super flavorful, but the game, a match itself doesn't tell the story, and I think that's kind of what is going to happen with Lorcana as well.
Yeah, definitely not in the game itself, but through the cards. And by that, I just mean the card art. We can see, that's where I see potentially more glimpses of the story. But yeah, through the cards themselves, through the art, um, like I'm looking at Tinkerbell and Hook, and I'm thinking through the Dreamborn steel or just Dreamborn Peter Pan cards. Looking at all of those together, there might be some like interconnected story in between those. Because in the Steelborn Hook, we see that Tinkerbell has been captured potentially, and maybe there might be a Peter Pan card where Tinkerbell is with Peter Pan and flying off together away from Hook or something. I've seen those kind of stories told throughout the cards and games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Even has various stories told throughout their cards too. Those are really hard to find, but they're there.
I think it's a great call, by the way, that the art may hint at some of these things, because we haven't seen enough cards yet to really know. But excuse me, but like, for example, will we have multiple different versions of the same character that are from different time periods and different parts of the story or what have you, right? And it's like, if they really want to keep that first chapter cohesive and the broader kind of 4 sets in that first year cohesive, then what we should be seeing is kind of characters that from set to set are maybe evolving, or within that same set, like you're mentioning the tiny tactician Tinkerbell and the Dreamborn Captain Hook, right? They should kind of look like they go together, and you could imagine narratives putting them together in the same place at the same time.
And you also have to remember, all the way back to the very first cards revealed, the flavor text on Elsa specifically mentions story, essentially, which is recreated by magical ink. Elsa found herself in an unfamiliar new world. Fortunately, ice works the same way everywhere. So, I mean, it's right there on that one of the very first cards, of what we're doing and what's going on. So, I mean, yeah, the cards are going to have something.
Yeah.
One thing to note, they changed that flavor text between D23 and the first chapter. Just an interesting change. And I think they changed unfamiliar world to what was it, entirely new world or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like when I see it, they made slight changes here and there, and it makes me wonder, like, was there a story reason to change some of these things, or was it just some alignment thing or what have you?
Just ironing some things out, I think. But definitely, that's another great point. Yeah, the flavor text will have a lot of the story bits too, especially for the Dreamborn cards. I feel like we'll have a lot more of those tidbits.
Yeah, I think that flavor text in particular, I think, the word was an unfamiliar new world. They changed it to an entirely new world. And I think they changed that because they've decided that this is a familiar world. The world that that Elsa is in her card art, I think that it is familiar to her, but it is, it is different. It's not the world she came from, but it is still familiar to her. So I think that's probably why they changed that one. But yeah, there's so much to glean from these, flavor texts that, you read them and they don't seem like much, just a little sentence here and there. But I think there is a lot that you can pull from them if you care to look way too deeply, with a fine-tooth comb.
We would never do that. Come
on. What? Theory crafting? What?
Yeah. So we had some questions, which I think we've already basically covered, with threats to the Great Illuminary and actual representations of things in Lorcana. I think we've basically covered all that. So we're moving into that area of things that we would like to know. And we already talked about Floodborn. So I guess, is there anything left? We don't want to know, like, as you mentioned, what are our theories about who created Lorcana? Will we ever find out who that is? Will that ever be something that becomes part of the story more than someone had created it, and we know who it is, but they're never going to be seen because now that's no longer part of the story. Now we're the story. I mean, what do you think is going to happen there? I think Blake has an answer.
There was a passage in the story that they put on the website that really just hit me. In the part where it's talking about the inkcaster, it's an inkcaster, and when you pick it up, it feels both exciting and familiar. So I'm wondering if we're going to have kind of like a Dreamlight Valley story where we forgot that we were the first Illumineer and that we've come back to this now down the line, something along those lines. And if we're not, I definitely want to know who was.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, it is, because if you follow that through, what they say later in the text on the website, other Illumineers across the globe will be called to the aid of Lorcana. So, you know, if you have forgotten, if you're the first one back, are you the person who created it and you're just coming back, and then now all the other Illumineers are coming back? Or was it something that was created by the collective imagination of everybody who is an Illumineer? Like, is it one person or is it everybody?
I'm kind of, it's interesting. Initially, half jokingly, I was thinking like it'd be, cool or funny if it was, Walt Disney was the creator of it, or if the wizard in Fantasia, I think his name's, was it Yen Sid? Yeah, like
Yen Sid.
Like, but the more I think about it, the more I kind of wonder if it isn't better to kind of keep the Wizard of Oz behind his curtain and just not actually know, and there's always some mystery there to where it was created. Maybe we learn more about the history of it over time and what have you, but I'm actually not sure that I want to know the full history of it. Maybe I just enjoy kind of having a little bit of mystery there. I don't know. I haven't placed my finger quite on where it came from. I think if you look at the pictures of the Great Illuminary and what have you, it looks very constructed. We joke about the Dyson sphere and what have you, but it's like, it looks like it was intentional. It doesn't look like something organic or, just that came out of nowhere to me. So I think there took some engineering or illumineering to create it. But I think I kind of don't want to know, maybe, or at least not yet. Maybe it's just too early.
You have to leave some mystery there. I was of the same opinion. I wondered if it was Yen Sid, but if we have a sorcerer Mickey already, then it would stand to reason that Yen Sid is probably in Lorcana as well.
Yeah, but is he a Glimmer or is he the creator? I don't know.
He appears in Fantasia, which was done by Walt Disney Animation Studios, and therefore is open to be a Glimmer. Anything in Walt Disney Animation Studios, I think, is up for grabs. Did Walt Disney ever appear in one of his movies or shorts?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. I think Mickey was kind of his personification, but I don't know.
Yeah. Parker, thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to work it out with avoiding some other thing. They did say, I think they did say in the article that we will find out more about who's behind it all in the I don't know if it's called the visual guide or art guide or whatever.
Player's guide.
The player's guide in the Illumineers Trove. So it looks like that's at least one avenue that they want to use to help flesh out the story. So I think we'll definitely, maybe they won't pull back the curtain all the way, but maybe we'll get some hints about, about where this all came from, how this started. I think that'll be a good place to get some more story tidbits. But I would really be interested in seeing more. We've talked about, we've joked about like a movie or a TV show about, about Lorcana, and I think that that's a great idea. I think that I've been in and out of Magic the Gathering, pretty much since high school. I play for a couple of years and then stop, play for a couple of years and stop. But one of the times I started playing again was because I watched a trailer for one of the sets. It was just like a 2-minute trailer for War of the Spark. And I was completely out of Magic at that time. Watched this trailer and instantly I went out. I think I downloaded Magic the Gathering Arena, and I bought some packs and tried to get my friends to draft with me. But I think they have a lot of possible avenues to get people into the game, rather than just having them having potential customers see see a pack on the shelves. I think that the Disney marketing machine can reach a lot of people in a lot of interesting and fulfilling ways.
It is ripe for the picking. I would agree.
I really want to see the trailer for the next Lorcana set as the preview to whatever major Disney film is coming out at the time. Just those same kind of trailers, just have the 2-minute short showing the next set of Lorcana. It'd be very cool.
All right, I have one more question that wasn't on the list that I was just thinking about. So in the game itself, there's a mechanic called shift. And the way we explain it is it's going to be like Pokemon or Digimon, where you evolve your character into another form. But lore-wise, what do you think the explanation for shift would be?
I believe I kind of talked about it when I was talking about the magical ink being a double-edged sword. So it definitely invokes that feeling of an overflow of ink, and it's like you used your ink to make this character, but then all of a sudden you're taking even more ink and it's transforming this character even more, from the Dreamborn to the Floodborn.
That's right, you did say that.
Yeah.
I think we've seen enough cards by now, and even some confirmation in this article that Shift and Floodborn are pretty intricately linked. I don't know if we'll see cards with Shift that aren't Floodborn, or Floodborn cards that don't have Shift. But I think the idea is that they're pretty connected. And Blake, I did like your idea of too much ink, or even corrupted ink. I think maybe the threat is called the flood. I think that ominous darkness could be what's the flood, and maybe it's not sentient, but maybe it is, and maybe it is corrupting the ink. And when you create a glimmer with this corrupted ink, it doesn't end up the way you intended. It ends up as something slightly new. And lore-wise, shifting from a character that already exists to a Floodborn version, that could just be you need to pay some cost, some resource to shift from the base character to the Floodborn. So maybe that maybe lore-wise in story, that resource that you're spending, whether it be ink or Story Star or whatever, maybe that has been corrupted by this flood, by this darkness.
I think I like the term shift because it kind of implies movement, right, and or changing, and it ties very well with the Floodborn concept, where it's like flood is a lot of liquid normally, right, and so the idea that this thing is fluid or amorphous or what have you really lends itself well to that term shift. So too does, from a aspect of light and illumination, all this is the idea of like a prismatic nature of light or color or whatever. And we don't know much yet still about how all the pieces fit, but I think it's probably tied to one of those two, where it's either like an overwhelming amount of ink that means that these things are kind of liquid and they can change shape, and that's what shifting is. Or maybe there's a way to kind of shift colors or kind of shift the illumination, what have you, to bend to its will or what have you, from a lore perspective. But it's interesting.
So the only slight pushback that I would give the three of you on this theory is that in the article, it specifically says that these Floodborn characters are from stories that actually happened in Lorcana. So you were talking about summoning a character, and when you're summoning it, maybe it's corrupted ink, or when it was brought down, it was like changed. But if it's from a story that actually happened in Lorcana, it feels like these Floodborn characters would have been purposefully summoned. And what do you think about that, Blake?
I will say that it does kind of hold true, because we need to have that glimmer in Lorcana first, and then the flood part happens in game, because we need to, well, we don't have to, but it's recommended gameplay wise to play the Floodborn characters out for cheaper on top of another glimmer that already exists. So lore wise, I could see it being something that happens after we brought this glimmer, and maybe for like Hades, there's something dark about the ink that's calling to him, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go get some more ink, and this will give me more power, and now I can rule over Olympus or something like that. That just my theory on that sort of take.
So the way I understand it, story stars are like the source material. They're the stories. So that is the original Disney character.
Yeah.
Inside Lorcana, there's story stars in Lorcana, but that's just like the pages of a book, let's say. It's just that they exist there. They don't exist as actual characters until you infuse the stars with the ink into the lore book and create them. So Floodborn don't exist, and Dreamborn and Storyborn glimmers, even none of those actually exist as glimmers until you infuse some ink and create them. So Floodborn don't happen obviously until you create them. So I think that is the thing, is whether they are created after as a result of something going wrong while you're creating a Storyborn or a Dreamborn, or if it's something that happens after the glimmer is already created, existing in Lorcana as a glimmer, and then something happens to it to change it while it's in Lorcana and no longer just the source material. I think that's where we're going to have what's happening with, and explain that with the shift and the Floodborn and all of that and where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think not to over-index on the kind of ink concept, but I think one of the things that exists with writing ink, at least, is blotting paper, which is to kind of remove excess ink when you're writing with it. And so imagine that this magical ink that we're using, we just don't have any blotting paper or a blotter or whatever you want to call it. And so effectively, sometimes when we create these glimmers, maybe there's just excess ink, and sometimes it's our dreams come to life, which is Dreamborn. Sometimes it's the story stars original story, which is kind of Storyborn. And sometimes there's just a little bit too much magical ink flowing and you get a Floodborn. I don't know.
Lucid dreams, huh?
and unfortunately, we're not going to find out, I don't think, anytime soon, because the quote is, we'll learn more about Floodborn glimmers in upcoming sets. So I don't think we're going to find out, maybe not even until the end of the first year, if that, like, more of the complete story. We may get little tidbits, but I mean, I don't know when we're going to find out like the whole story of it. I mean, I hope we find within the first year, but it's going to take a little while, I think.
Calling it now, blotting paper set 4.
The blotting shield, right?
All right. Well, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything we missed that you guys want to talk about? Well, before we get to our news roundup, I want to take a moment and acknowledge each of you. Surreal-George, you just for fun decided to create this amazing deck building tool over at dreamborn.ink. I want you to take a moment with us and share with us what you're up to with that, and plug that a little bit.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit premature to actually have a deck builder for Lorcana, given we have, I don't know, 25-ish cards and we don't know the rules or anything yet. But yeah, I was kind of looking for a way to contribute back to the community. And, I'm not a podcaster, I'm not a YouTuber, not a great writer of articles. And I think there's other folks who have done amazing jobs. Artem has Lorcania, and the Musha Report is a great wiki and articles. And so I figured, I can code, and I was looking to get back into coding. So I created dreamborn.ink. And obviously it's too early to really use, but if folks notice any issues with it or have any ideas for me, please do seek me out. I'm on the Lorcana HQ Discord as Surreal, or on Twitter as dreamborn.ink, and always looking for feedback or ideas.
Well, it's a beautiful looking website and has a great
Thanks.
user interface. And I think it's going to be a great resource. Okay, and Levram-Blake, you are a member of the Glimmer Gang podcast, and that's one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. But you are also starting your own YouTube channel all about lore. I mean, so tonight has really been right up your wheelhouse. So tell us more about your upcoming YouTube channel.
Basically, this channel is going to be under my username, Warlock Levram. So you'll just search that into YouTube, and hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, the first video will be up. But basically, I will be doing a lot of what we kind of did tonight, just going over what we've gotten so far, and just some theory videos going over some things that I anticipate to see coming up and what we might see for the story, and just having fun reading into the lore and seeing what we can glean from it until we get more info.
Well, and I will say this, you gave me a sneak peek of the audio part of it. I mean, it's going to be video as well, but you gave me a sneak peek of the audio, and it sounds amazing. Like, it sounds like a really well produced audio, and I can't wait to see what this looks like. It's going to be something worth checking out. So when you have that up, I mean, hopefully you can send me the link and we can include it in the show notes. All right, and finally, Parker, you don't have any like content or podcasts that you do, but you're super active on the Lorcana HQ Discord server, and I always love what you have to say. So if people want to get a hold of you, I know you're in the Lorcana HQ, but is there anywhere else that you're active?
No, that's really the only place I'm active right now. I mean, I have my own personal Twitter account that I use to browse around, but no, I mean, if you ever want to talk about anything Lorcana, hit me up on the Discord. Yeah, like Jared said, I've got nothing to plug, but I've been really pleased with this community so far. I know that a lot of the times gaming communities, particularly trading card communities, can get pretty toxic and hostile, but I've just absolutely loved this community so far. For me, this has been a lot of fun. It's just kind of like a scavenger hunt or a puzzle to work out. So I love hearing everybody's opinions on all these different speculations. So I'm just happy to be a part of it.
All right, so let's jump into the summary of the news. And there's not a whole lot this week, but we did get one card reveal. It was Tigger, and it was revealed on the first day of spring from the Disney Lorcana account, and it was titled Springing into Spring, art by Kenneth Anderson. It's a 6 cost, 4 strength, 4 defense, and it has the evasive mechanic with the traits of Storyborn and Tigger. Blake, what do you think about this card?
One, I just love that his subtype or archetype includes Tigger.
That's awesome.
I just find that so flavorful.
He's not a hero. He's not a villain. He's not an ally. He's just Tigger because he's the only one.
Tigger.
Double gut. That spells Tigger. Basically seems like a nice, slightly cheaper Mickey potentially. It just builds up nicely. I could see if Red gets a lot more evasive cards, that just a nice evasive package that builds up more and more evasive and stronger evasive characters. So
I think evasive could be a pretty strong ability.
oh yeah, for sure.
These are some tanky cards between him and Mickey.
A bit tanky and hard to get rid of, other than Dragonfire or many other actions that we get along those lines.
And if you combine this with Aurora's ward ability, I mean, this is something they were talking about on Lorcana card pool, so I stole this from him. But I mean, if you had Aurora on the board protecting your evasive characters, how strong is that? It's busted.
Pretty strong. Yeah, you gotta start digging through quite a bit in order to get those evasive characters. So maybe Ruby Sapphire deck. That sounds nice.
I like the flavor text too. I'm the bounciest bouncer that ever bounced. All right. Do you have anything to add to this, James? I know we have you doing research right now.
Yeah, I just love that, we're getting a new franchise. We got Tigger, who is awesome. And I just can't wait to see what new cards they bring, because, I mean, so far, everything's awesome.
You almost made me start singing the song. All right. So is there any other news that we missed? I think this has pretty much been it.
That's about it. Yeah, that was a big week last week with those 2 articles and the prices and the story and everything. And then this week we got a card so far.
Yep.
Okay, well then we're going to move into Jeopardy, and Blake has kindly agreed to be our Jeopardy contestant. So James, fire away. You know how to play Jeopardy, right, Blake?
I do, and I've been listening, so yeah.
Okay. Take it away.
I gotta give me just a second to find one more. I've got to find another kind of hard one here.
Oh, we didn't take enough time.
No, it's fine. It'll take us. I only need one more.
It is difficult. Like, you scroll through them and you're like, is this too hard, or is this a 500 level question?
All right. So we're ready for some trivia here.
Okay.
For 100, this is the name of Cinderella's stepmother.
That's for 100. Her stepmother's name.
Can I give a clue?
Yes.
Lady. Her title is Lady.
Yeah. And yeah, who exactly is Lady Tremaine? Yeah.
There you go.
There we go.
All right, for 200. See, these are gonna be like, oh, the 200 should have been the 100, and the 400 should have been the 300.
No, you're fine.
This is the armor that the Kakamora uses in Moana.
Oh no, you found a movie I haven't gotten to see yet.
Oh no.
It's been on my watch list forever. Oh,
you have to see it. The music is so good.
I told you should have seen it by now. Okay, so I'm gonna have to pass on this one because I have not seen Moana.
It's a is it a fruit?
Is it?
And you can get milk out of it.
Coconut? What's a coconut?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Next one. This might be another. We might hit you with another one that you haven't seen, but we'll see. This is the name of the hamster in Bolt.
I have seen Bolt, but it's been a while. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since about the year it came out.
Yeah.
James comes with the tough questions.
Right. I mean, I do have to keep my 5 for 5 going and make sure I always put in a question that no one can get, right?
That's just rude. Yeah. I'm gonna have to take the loss for this one.
My hint is that it's something that would be the exact, well, not the exact, but definitely an opposite of a hamster.
Who is Biggs?
It's a rhino.
Rhino. I was going through a list of names, but I realized they were all the guinea pigs for Jeep Force.
I was trying to think, what is the opposite of a hamster?
A big, giant, armored creature.
Yep. Okay.
All right, for 400,
400.
what kind of animal killed Tarzan's birth parents? Or this is the animal that killed Tarzan's birth parents.
Ooh. What is a leopard?
Yes. All right.
And, oh,
All right, so now for one that I thought was going to be extremely hard, but we shall see.
mhm.
This is the name of Bambi's love interest.
Oh man, to talk about a movie I haven't seen even longer. Oh goodness, it's been so long.
I would have never got this, by the way. And I saw the movie like, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Give or take a decade for me. Jeez, it's been a long time. I want to say, I'm gonna have to give up on this one. I cannot think of.
It's similar to a salt solution.
To a salt solution.
Instead of saline.
That's Phaline, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
That was a great guess.
That was a great hint.
That's awesome.
Well, it's late, and I gave you some apparently all 500-point questions.
Yeah, those were pretty tough.
It's all subjective.
Yeah.
Someone's 100 and someone's 500. So
I mean,
yeah.
Jared asked me a question once that I had seen the movie like 2 days before and couldn't remember the answer. So that's how bad I am sometimes. Oh,
All right.
I made it through though. I got some right.
Yes, he did. All right. So if people want to find you online besides your new YouTube channel, where can they find you, Blake?
Mainly the Lorcana HQ is where I spend most of my time. Glamour Gang podcast. We're trying to get to a weekly / bi-weekly schedule. So just hearing me there, and then YouTube, hopefully starting alongside the airing of this podcast. And I do have other socials, but I'm working on getting set up on Lorcana, so I will have my profile up there and with all my other socials listed there once I get everything together.
Nice.
that does remind me, if you are hearing this sometime in the future and you want to find out about almost anyone that we've had as a guest that's another content creator, Lorcana.com most likely has links for all their social media links for them. So yes, if you want to find Blake, probably anytime, sometime within a week or so after this, go look on Lorcana.com. You'll probably find him. You can find where he is.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thanks, Artem. And if you liked what you heard, you can subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube channel, all the above. And you can follow me on Twitter at Citizens of Lorcana. And James, where can they find you?
I'm everywhere at Dan Regal, and you can check out geekshotphoto.com for links for my wife and I and all the photography and everything like that we have done. And thank you all for joining us and for listening.